Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming along. Thank you for joining us in our wonderful, beautiful new chapel. For many of you, it will be the first time in here, so welcome. Before we get started, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country, particularly as we are in Reconciliation Week this week. So, in acknowledging the country in which Cathedral College Wangaratta stands, I would like to give thanks to Byami, the Creator, for all that is around us. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our totem, Nagoon, Koala, for looking over us as we go into each day guiding our journey. Dirawara, together we acknowledge the bravery of past, present and future Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and Bangarang people. So welcome to the Pathways Information Evening. As I said, thank you for coming out on what is a chilly Wangaratta evening. So we've got sort of 4 or 5 parts this evening that will be presented by myself, Anne Harris, the Deputy Principal and Head of Senior School, along with Paul Carson, our VCE Coordinator and Year 12 YLC, Rod Dunbar, who is our Careers and Vet Coordinator, and Mrs Julie Finlay, our Director of Studies. We also have Nick Jones, our Principal here, Glenn Wyatt, who is the Year 9 YLC, and Candice Potter, who is one of our VCE teachers and works with learning enrichment as well. So you might be feeling one of those emotions as a parent about to perhaps have a young person embark on the VCE journey. You'll be receiving a lot of information tonight, and your brain might hurt by the end of the evening. Hopefully, if you're not feeling like that now, you're not going to feel like that at the end of the night. But it's okay. It's only the start of the journey, and there's lots of people that will be here to help. For today's students, there are very many options, and they keep changing, and it seems that each year they have more to choose from. For many of us sitting in the audience, there was far less choices. It was pretty straightforward. You went to school, and after school, you probably went to university, TAFE, or straight into employment. And at school, there wasn't too many different options. It was a very linear pathway, and that was about it. There wasn't too much choice. I think a railway network is a much more accurate metaphor for education and that transition between school and the workplace. It's not linear. Students go off, they explore things, they come back, and so on. I chose this railway network as opposed to this one, the Melbourne one, because I did feel that there was a bit of a vortex in the middle, and we don't want them just spiralling round and round. We do want them to kind of make some decisions and keep moving forward. I think it's important before we start exploring later on the pathways that our students have available. I think we need to know what we're preparing them for once they finish school, because the mark of a successful school is having students that when they graduate are able to contribute in a positive manner to our society. So let's have a little bit of a look. The Foundation for Young Australia has been doing a number of reports over the years looking at work for young people. And Jan Owen, the former CEO, said that there would be a lot of disruption. That was before COVID. And you may have heard this statistic before, that by the time our young people get through their working life, they will possibly have had 18 different employers. That's 18 different bosses to navigate across 6 different careers. So for me, I find that really incredible, that our young people are going to be switching careers. I've been in education for my working life, and maybe some of you have had one career, or maybe you've sort of changed. But our young people will probably be changing quite a lot. So we need to acknowledge what are some of the key drivers that are causing this change. And as it says on the screen, automation, so the robots are coming to take our jobs. Globalization and collaboration. The workplace is no longer, as Dolly Parton once sang, 9 to 5. It might be sitting in a cafe and you look like you're drinking a coffee, but you're doing business with someone over in America. And you're actually working 2 or 3 different jobs. So there's a lot more flexible work. 10 years ago, words and terms like Uber, Deliveroo, hot desking, crowdfunding, cryptocurrency, social media influencers did not exist. I kind of wish some of them still didn't exist, but never mind. We're actually in the 4th industrial revolution. Technological advancement meet the Internet of Things. The social learning revolution, where large groups of people, can come together. They can connect online and solve problems that governments and institutions haven't been able to do because of that flexibility. Routine jobs are going to disappear, leaving more time for other jobs which will emerge. They'll be outsourced. There's new technology coming, leaving the non-routine jobs at the end of the skill continuum. So how do we future-proof today's students for tomorrow's world of work? What will the jobs of tomorrow look like, and what skills will they require? And you saw on the video at the start just a few that come into play. A lot of them had digital literacy. A lot of them had design as well. And one report that I've read talks about jobs being of the head, the heart, and the hand. So problem solving, creative solutions, the heart, counselling and services, talking to people, because we've got computers to do the other stuff, and robots, automation. And the hand, we still need trades, plumbers and electricians and all the rest, because they're all different jobs. They're not repetitive, they're always changing. So you might be a data specialist with so much data being produced every second. Or you might be a privacy expert protecting people from their data being shared. Maybe you're a food chemist using a 3D printer to print food. There will always be nursing and care professionals as well, because we have an ageing population. So that is a big growing industry. So how do you navigate this? What skills do you need? Success skills. Sometimes they're called enterprise skills. I've heard them called soft skills, but I don't like that term because they're really important. They're more important. Transferable skills. Year 9's in here. You do social enterprise this year. What a great start. Problem solving, creativity, communication, teamwork, financial literacy, digital literacy, critical thinking, and presentation skills. Because when it comes down to it, if you're graduating with another 100 people with the same bachelor degree or the same apprenticeship with the same piece of paper, the employer's going to be looking for someone that's got these skills. So we need to work on building those. How many of you have been asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Okay, it's kind of linear, isn't it? It's very one-dimensional. I think a better question, the new question needs to be, what skills and attributes do you have, and how can these contribute to society? Knowledge, character, how we behave and engage in the world, and skills. What are your strengths? What are your passions? What are you interested in? So with that, hopefully I've kind of set the scene and perhaps open your mind to the fact that things are changing. And so what pathways are there to help you navigate the future? So I'm going to pass over to Mr. Carson.
VCE started in 1987. For those people who weren't around in 1987, that's what a phone looked like. That's what my telly looked like. And the remote was actually stuck to it. That was my computer. That was the TV and movie. That was Daniel-san. Sorry for the kids today. That's Cobra Kai, 30 years on. That was my cool car. I've seen a few mullets, so I don't know. He used the voice, and the VCE was on. So things have changed in the last 30 years, not just the hairstyles. And we're coming to the VCE. What is it now? And I'm clicking, just hoping that's going behind me. I'm working with a lot of TLAs. For those people who aren't aware of those, that's 3-letter acronyms. So I'll be doing a few, and FLAs, 4-letter acronyms. I'll be giving you some terms, some things that we're talking about. But it still comes down to your choice, what you're interested in, what you're thinking about for the future. What studies, what areas interest you, what are best for me, what studies are prerequisites for what I might want to do in the future, and what if my choices clash? What's my plan B? What's my plan C? And, always important, what if I change my mind? Because, as Anne said a little bit earlier, not everything is linear. You make a decision, it's not quite the right one. You change it, you move it, you adapt. So I go down to what is VCE, and I look at this class up behind me, and that's the class of 2020. And I'm pretty proud of this class because they were our COVID class. This was their graduation evening. This was the 7th plan of our graduation evening because we had lockdown, shut down, open. So this is up there. But when I see that group of students up there, I don't think of their study scores or I don't think of their working class or their ATARs. I think of the stories that we've heard since they've left. And Rod is really good at giving us some information about what they're doing. So whether they are managing at McDonald's, whether they're doing their Bachelor of Science at Melbourne, whether they're doing their apprenticeship in electricity as an electrician, they're around here our town, or unfortunately when you're trying to be incognito in Melbourne, sometimes I'll come and tap you on the shoulder there and say g'day. That's what we're about. So what is the Victorian Certificate of Education? It's a diverse pathway to study or to further study or training at TAFE University or to moving on to employment. I've ripped that straight from the VCAR website. Oh, VCAR, that's another FLA, 4-letter acronym, Victorian Curriculum Assessment Authority. The coursework is overseen by them and it's usually completed over 2 years. We have a few students who are working over 3 years because that's their flexible learning, that's what works best for them. And it's across a broad range of subjects. I've got a poster up on my wall which has all the just straight VCE subjects. And before I came in tonight, I thought I'd count them, so don't worry if when I look at my hand, there's 42 different VCE studies and 35 different languages that people can study. And that doesn't include all the other things like school-based apprenticeships or vet studies. So what is the VCE? It's broken up into units. Year 11, you do units that are Year 11 standard. They don't need to be studied in a particular order. You can do a Unit 1 and do something completely different as a Unit 2. So you might do geography for the first semester and you might do history. Or you might do geography and geography. It's up to you. And at Year 12, they're 3, 4, they are together. So they're taken as a sequence. So if you're in my physics class, you're doing Unit 3 physics and Unit 4 physics. All Year 11 is assessed here at school, and Year 12 has a mixture of stuff that's assessed here at school by our teachers and also externally through exams. To receive your VCE certificate, so to finish your VCE, you have to satisfactorily complete 16 units over the 2 years. That means you're here, you have attendance, and there's a level or a standard of work that you need to produce. Of the 16 units, at least 3 of them must be English, and they also must include a 3-4 English. So you can have a little hiccup at Year 11 English, but Year 12 English, not so much. And then at least 3 other 3-4 sequences. So I've got up there a typical Cathedral College VCE course outline. And when I say a typical, we have students who are dipping into lots of different places. But in Year 11, students will do 6 subjects, generally. And at Year 12, they'll do 5, including one of those as English. But right now, we have some Year 10 students who are doing a fast track subject. They've already started their VCE process. So I'm not sure if anyone's in here. Can I have hands up if any of our Year 10s in here are currently fast tracking a subject? So you can already see a few of those. So that'll be offered to our Year 9s, and they'll then do a subject at Year 11, one of their 3-4 subjects, a Year 12 subject. And if you are considering fast tracking, so if you are a Year 9 student who is thinking of that, it is hard work. We get you, we'll have a chat to you, we'll work our way through what's important and what's going to work best for you. We'll also present some of the obstacles, some of the cons, but we'll also present the pros as well. If you do that 6th subject, when we talk about the scores, which I'll do in a little bit of time, it's an extra 10% onto those values. Your subject options, as I said before, come from a wide range of area, including the VCE subjects taught here at school. We also have some subjects that we can work via Virtual Schools Victoria, VSV, another three-letter acronym. That means you are working pretty much like you might have done in lockdown COVID, where everything's done remotely from Melbourne, including ringing up the teachers and submitting all the work that way. And we also have vet subjects and school-based apprenticeships and a whole heap of other range of options, which Mr. Dunbar will go through soon. Study scores. We often get this question, how does things work in Year 12? Study scores is your SAC results and your SAT results. So SAC means school assessed coursework, things that are done at school, and SATs are school assessed tasks, which are also done at school, but they're mainly folio subjects, like in media, design and technology. I'm just making sure Mr. Garris is watching up the top, at the back, and things like that. To be average, the median, the middle score is 30. So the scores range from 0 to 50. Now I have a little video, and this is where I trust Yaz's technology here, and if I press that button, it should work.
What's a study score? VCAA study scores are the first step in the calculation of your ATAR. A study score summarises a student's achievements in Units 3 and 4 by comparing them against everyone else enrolled in the same study that year. A student's study score is a rank that is presented as a number from 0 to 50. This mark is not based on how a student performed in any single school-based assessment or external exam, but indicates their relative achievement across all graded assessments against everyone else enrolled in the study. How do you get a study score? To have a study score reported, students typically must have satisfactorily completed Units 3 and 4 in sequence in the same year. And as part of that sequence, every VCE study has 3 graded assessments, apart from VCE vet studies, which have 2. A graded assessment may be a school-assessed coursework, SAC, or a school-assessed task, SAT, or an external assessment, typically an examination. There's no secret formula to study scores. It's simply a student's final score placed in the range of scores available for that study. The calculation uses basic mathematics. A score of 50 means that the student was ranked in the top 0.3% of students in that study. A study score of 40 plus means the student was ranked in the top 9% of all students enrolled in that study. A study score of 30 is the average. A little over 2/3 of all reported study scores lie between 23 and 37. Completing your VCE is an important step, and while the better your study scores, the better your ATAR, your study scores do not define your life. They are just a point in time. Success in life can take many forms. To learn more about calculating your study score, visit the VCAA website.
So we might have a student who has their scores, and then that might be scaled. And you'll hear lots about scaling subjects and how much subjects might go up and go down. And again, we sit back to that first basic premise of choosing subjects that you're interested in, choosing subjects that you enjoy, and choosing subjects that are on the pathway. There's lots of mathematics behind the scaling, so I thought it was a really quick video that was much simpler than me trying to explain it, and I'm a maths teacher and I'd probably spend 3 or 4 hours and it'd be great. But anyway, I'll just press play on the video.
Every VCE subject is scaled before it can be used in the ATAR. In this video, we're going to discuss how we do it and why. Firstly, scaling is not about how hard or how easy we think subjects are. It's about measuring how competitive each subject is. But what does that mean? Well, first we have to talk about VCE study scores. The first thing to understand about VCE study scores is that they're actually rankings, or relative positions, that measure your performance compared to all other students who took that study. They're reported as a figure between 0 and 50, and 30 is always the average. So if you achieve a study score of 30 in chemistry, for example, that means that you have performed better than 50% of all VCE chemistry students in that year. Now, each VCE subject has a unique student cohort. For example, the group of VCE students undertaking literature is different to the group doing chemistry, which is different to the one doing economics. So because each group is unique, and because study scores rank performance in each subject alone, it can be harder to be average and get 30 in some subjects than in others, not because of an inherent difficulty in the subject, but because of who else is doing it. Let's use a sporting analogy by taking two races of the 100 metre sprint. One is the Victorian final, the other is the Olympic final. Both are running the same distance, under the same rules, but it will be harder to get middle place in the Olympic final because you're running against a more competitive group. In some VCE subjects, it can be harder to get the middle study score of 30 because you're undertaking it with a more competitive cohort of students. Whether it's a race or a study, ranking middle will always be harder when the competition is greater. Scaling allows us to determine how competitive each subject is and then gives us a result as if every Year 12 had done the same subject. So how do we do it? Using chemistry as an example, we look at all of the VCE students who did chemistry and how they performed in all of their subjects. If the chemistry students average higher than 30 for their studies, including chemistry, then this tells us that their overall performance is above average. The subject was more competitive, so scaling goes up. If the students average lower than 30, say 28, scaling would go down, as it would demonstrate that the competition was lower and that it was easier to achieve the average score of 30. Scaling isn't about individual students or schools either. Subjects are scaled exactly the same for the entire state. With scaling, we can compare each student fairly because it determines that the level of achievement in one subject is the same as every other study. It means that you won't be unfairly disadvantaged by choosing a subject which is very competitive or unfairly advantaged by choosing a subject which is less competitive. Every subject is scaled from scratch each year, so if a subject was scaled down last year, it doesn't mean that's going to happen again this year. The competition can and does change each year. Sometimes people look at the scaling process from previous years when choosing their subjects, but this can be a mistake. If you choose a subject that you're not good at and don't enjoy just because it gets scaled up, it's likely that you won't perform very highly and that even after scaling, your overall scaled study score would be lower than if you had chosen a subject that you were good at. The way to ensure that you achieve your best ATAR is to choose studies according to what interests you, what you're good at, and which studies you need to achieve your future study goals.
The last part I've got for tonight is ATARs, the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank, where they put all the study scores together, they put all the scaling together, and then they give you a score. It's a magical process that every year last year it was right in December, that causes great panic, great stress, and then hopefully a week after we move on and we're doing what we want to do for the rest of our life, the most important thing. Going back to that photo of those Year 12s from 2020, as I said, I can't remember any ATARs, but I can remember their stories. And I think for us as a school, that's the key thing. Hopefully opening up as many doors as possible, and performing as well as you can, but also remembering that you need to choose subjects that you enjoy, choose subjects that you're good at, and choose subjects that are going to open up the future pathway for you. I've got Mr. Dunbar here, so he's next. All yours, Rod.
Okay, so Paul's given a very broad picture of the VCE and how everything works in there, and it's my job now to just drill down into some of the aspects that can be included in your program that are more of a vocational nature. So many of our students will just do what I describe as a straight VCE program, where they're just doing VCE subjects, VCAR subjects, over the 2 years. But for all students, there are other options that, as I said, are more of a vocational nature. And the first of these are VET courses. And we have many students here at the Cathedral College who do VET courses in Year 10, Year 11 and or Year 12. There are VET courses and then there are VCE VET courses. Now these are VET courses that they've sort of selected from the broad range of VET courses, and believe me, there are hundreds of them, literally hundreds of VET courses. But there are 27 that they've designated and nominated as VCE VET subjects. So these are very clearly prescribed subjects, and everyone doing these vet courses would do the same work. And vet courses lead to a range of nationally accredited qualifications, Certificate 1, Certificate 2, Certificate 3, Certificate 4, they go up and up. Typically at school, if you're doing a vet, it would be Certificate 2 or 3 in most cases. Now, they also actually count as one of your VCE subjects. So instead of, say, in Year 11 doing 6 VCE subjects, you could be doing 5 as well as a vet course. You could even do 2 vet courses. There's theoretically no limit to the number you can do, but most only do 1. And depending on the course of those 27, they can give an ATAR increment, either a 10% boost to your ATAR score, or some of them also have their own scored assessments. As you saw in the earlier presentation, it would be 1 SAC, 1 internal assessment, plus an end-of-year exam in that case. And of course, being of vocational nature, they might lead somewhere pretty directly, employment-wise, after school. So what are your options if you want to include some vet in your VCE program, or in Year 10 earlier on if you like? In the last 2 years, we've introduced vet on-site here at Cathedral, and they've been in the areas of sport and rec and information technology. So I think we've probably got about 50 or 60 students all up doing one of those 2 courses at the moment at school. Now, for a student doing one of those at school, their school program, or their vet course, doesn't feel much different to any of their VCE subjects. It's timed on their timetable, they go to classes, and after they've had their class, they go to their next class. Next year also, we are hoping to extend our vet offerings here at school, and we hope to be including community services and furnishings also. Can you do other vet courses? Yes, you can, and yes, we do have kids doing vet courses in a whole range of areas from a whole lot of different providers. So, for example, the most common being GoTAFE, and we've been having our students do vet courses through GoTAFE for a number of years now. They usually try and offer about a dozen, but then they usually end up only getting enough numbers to run about 6. Now, things are changing at the moment, and Julie will touch on this more later when she gives her talk. I'm not sure what TAFE will be doing next year. I have asked them, and I'm guessing they're not sure what they're doing next year because they haven't replied yet, and I asked a good week or 2 ago. So they're, like everyone else, with some changes occurring in the VCE, they're weighing up their options, I'm sure. So there's some of the ones that typically do run every year at GoTAFE. Now, I've got to let you know that if you do one of the vet courses here at school, the Sport and Rec and the IT or any others that we offer, they're included in your course fees. But when you go through an external provider such as GoTAFE, they charge on top of our school fees. Typically, a vet course through GoTAFE will be $2,000 to $2,500 a year, and the school's policy is that we pay half and you pay half. And there's also equine studies and animal studies. The students who do those first batch listed, they're out of school and at TAFE every Wednesday, and the ones that are online, obviously, they do those when they can, and they might have some webinars and the like. Now, there are other providers, and we have every year some students who find a whole range of things through a whole range of providers, some that I'm not even aware of often, and they're not necessarily the VCE vet courses, but as I said, drawn from the other hundreds of vet courses that are around. So, for example, we've had kids do dance through the Australian ATOD. I can't remember what the T's for, but the D's for dance and the A's for Australian. We've had students doing fitness training through the Australian Fitness Academy. And I'm just trying to think, we've had, what's another one? Can you think of any, Julie, off the top of your head? Oh, yeah, last year we had a student do media game writing through AIE, Australian Institute of, I can't remember, another 3-letter acronym. So there are, and again, they will have their own cost structures, and you need to be aware of that if you're looking at it. But if you've got an interest and you want to find out if there's a course around, please get in touch and we'll see what we can find. Often the students and the parents magically find them themselves. And as I said with the VCE vet courses, they're very prescribed, and you do this set of modules. when they come with other external providers, sometimes it's not so clear-cut and there's a bit of toing and froing about what modules you do and is it enough to qualify for VCE units. So that gets a bit tricky, but I work with you and we do our best. All right, so what does a vet course look like? As I said, if you do one of the ones we run here, it'll feel like pretty much any other VCE subject. It'll be on your timetable, you'll go to classes. Other providers have their own arrangements. As I said, at GoTAFE, usually you're out at TAFE or Wednesday. Some of them are online, some of them have other days. All right, what does it mean for your school program? So here's a student who's in year 10 and they're doing this one's actually doing a school-based apprenticeship, but it's pretty much the same. So you can see where their classes are and you see down on the bottom there on day 7, so this is 1 week of their 2-week timetable, there's a couple of blanks because that student is doing one less class here at school to accommodate their vet course, which is done outside of school. So they'll have some spare periods appear on their timetable. There's a couple there on the Tuesday or day 7 and a couple on the Thursday. So they would use that time either to catch up on some work that they might have missed on the Wednesday, which is shaded, that's when they're out at TAFE or at work. So you can see on the Wednesdays we have our assembly and or chapel and or homeroom, so there's a little less whilst we rate those activities and they're important, it means the school students doing their vet or school-based aren't having so much work to catch up on that they've missed on those days. So that's one of the reasons they're on Wednesdays. And next year, Mr Carson has promised me that there won't be double English or double maths classes for the VC students on the Wednesday, so they won't miss doubles of those core subjects. So fingers crossed you can achieve that. And here's a student in year 12, and you see that they've got quite a few spare periods spread out over their week for them to either catch up on their schoolwork or complete their vet work. If it's a school-based apprenticeship, they'll have module work to work through their TAFE booklets. So they'll find that time. Now, one of the benefits that you get from school-based apprenticeships or vet courses, and we'll get to school-based in a minute, is I think a time management skill. You've got to look at this as an opportunity. Yes, I'm missing classes, but I've got to manage my time really appropriately if I'm going to keep up to date with that and get my vet qualification. So that's one of the ways I try and sell it. All right, if you want some more information about vet, please get in touch with me or just do a bit of Googling because that's how I get a lot of my information these days. And look, if I don't pretend to know everything, but if I don't know something, I usually know who I can call to find it out. So rather than wade through everything yourself, please feel free to email or call me. Now, the other alternative that is common for many of our students is a school-based apprenticeship or traineeship, SBATs for sure. And look, in many ways, when I flick through this slide, you'll see that it sounds a lot like a vet course. So a range of fields, national qualifications, count as a VCE subject, and they can give an ATAR increment depending on the type. Not all of them do, but some of them do. And they can obviously provide pathways because you're actually starting an apprenticeship or a traineeship. When you do an SBAT, usually over 2 years, you've effectively done the first year of your apprenticeship or traineeship whilst you're at school. So we do have quite a few students who then move straight into a full-on apprenticeship in that area. So how are they different if they've got all those things in common? Well, the main difference is if you do a school-based apprenticeship, you are in the workplace 1 day a week, usually. Sometimes it's a little bit more than that, but usually it's 1 day a week. Some of them still require you to do a bit of TAFE time, not all of them. With some, you never go to TAFE and you'll do your work through books and your TAFE assessor might visit you at the workplace. It depends on the nature of the qualification. For example, if you do electrical, you spend usually a week per term at TAFE, so it does cut in quite a bit to your school program. And the other main difference is that doing a school-based apprenticeship or traineeship, you actually get paid. You get award wages and you don't pay for your qualification. So a pretty appealing sort of difference, I think. How do you start one? Well, the main thing you need is the want to get started and an employer who will take you on, just like in any other job. Some employers are better than others, of course. We know a few. Most of our students get their school-based through someone they know, a friend of a friend or a family friend, etc., which is fine. But often we can find one for you, but not always. And the one I mentioned earlier, electrical, are always in demand and pretty hard to come by. But we still find them often. And what can you do as a school-based apprenticeship or traineeship? If it's something that can be an apprenticeship or a traineeship full on, then you can do it as a school-based. So you can get started whilst you're still at school. And all you need is 15 years old. So you need to be 15, have an employer, and have a pathway in mind. And again, feel free to ask me if you've got questions, or do what I do and Google that. And I think that's about it from me. So over to you, Julie.
So just when you, some of you have got your head around this idea of VCE and VET, there are some changes that are taking place. And it includes a lot more acronyms you'll be really glad to know. So in 2020, the first review recommended some changes to the senior pathways that were offered in Victoria. And this has led to a restructuring of VCE and pathways available from next year. You'll hear the specifics about this, or a general, in an advertising campaign that's coming out over the next couple of weeks, called Many Talents, One VCE. And this is very much a moving feast at the moment. Information is being released weekly, and so what I share with you is not a complete picture because we don't have all of that information at the moment. What do we know? So in this new pathways option from next year, there's 3 parts to VCE. There's a VPC, a VM, and a VCE. So Victorian Pathway Certificate is a new certificate which replaces Foundation VCAL and can be completed over many years. And it's designed really for people that have been away, who are away from school at times and then come back again, which is why it's open-ended over how it can be completed. That's not an option that we would certainly entertain for next year. The next one is VCE Vocational Major, the VCE VM. It's a new program that replaces intermediate and senior VCAL, so from next year there is no VCAL. It's a standard-based assessment. There's no exams or an ATAR, and must be completed over 2 years in order to get that particular certificate. And this is the one where the curriculum is coming out, or more information and training is actually coming out at the moment. And then there's the third option, which is the Victorian Certificate of Education, which is what Paul has described. This is the one that we've operated and a lot of other schools in the area have operated. Again, it's got that standard-based assessment, can have examinations at the end of it in order to get that ATAR result, or there's a completion certificate where if you choose not to sit those final exams. And as I said, it's a very movable feast and not all information is available at that moment. So what do we know about these courses? We know that the VPC and the VM are going to replace VCAL. In the vocational major, to complete this, students will do a literacy component, a numeracy component, a work-related studies component, a personal development component, and a VET. So that's the 5 subjects, which if some students want to follow interests and certain things they're interested in, conflicts with a little bit. You can include a VCE subject in that, but that's in addition to those 5 requirements that you would need to have in order to actually reach the certificate completion. At VCE, Paul mentioned you need to have the English, and then you can have 4 or 5 VCE or VET subjects as part of that pathway, which may be an ATAR pathway, or you may choose to look at alternative pathways within that certificate that help you to go down a work pathway or college later on, whichever that you would like to do. It's really about you deciding where you would like to go and how we can put those subjects together to make them fit. It is this review that has taken place and the changes that I suppose have taken place in education over the last 2 years that have led us to actually look at what we do with our VCE and look at how can we better support our students to follow their individual interests, to use their ideas of their strengths to develop their own pathway. So as we speak today, there is not going to be no one fit for all of you, because what you want to do and how you get there will be individual, and we will help you along the way with that journey. To come up with the subjects that we're going to offer, we have surveyed students, and some of that has led us to these changes, to providing subjects in the vet field with the changes that are about to take place. So in the vet field, schools are clustered together, and the idea is that in an area that you're offering and can offer the core vet subjects. And these core vet subjects or areas are areas of future employment. So that's the idea of future employment has been the focus of providing something in community services and childhood education, building and construction, creative areas, engineering, health and hospitality. So we will look at what we can increase in our core provision, both on site or by using other providers and institutions by gaining access to those. As we talked about, vet furnishings is one that we look at providing next year. Community services is another, because we have access to allied health at the moment through the local hospital, but we know that health is one of our biggest areas that students want to go into. So how can we provide them more opportunities to do that? Our other big area is that area of outdoor education and PE and all those related, hence why we do sport and recreation. And a growing area is agriculture and the environment. A couple of other options that we know students have interest in are things like music, looking at areas of hospitality through, say, SBATs, or something like business. So the idea is that you can include one or two of those subjects in your VCE 5. As I said, this is a changing area. So what we're looking at the moment, not only about the curriculum, is what do industries want of our students to help them to find employment or to navigate their pathway into the future. The course designs are evolving at the moment, and what we can offer and how we can make combinations is another thing. And we've been surveying students about what their interests are and what their needs are. Year 10s have just completed that, and Year 9s will do that in the next couple of weeks. That helps us to see what patterns we have in providing subjects for our students, and each year the subjects that are offered or taken up slightly vary depending on that cohort. We know that an ATAR pathway isn't for everyone, and we'll talk in a moment about options for those people that are not sure or know that they would like to go straight into employment. We know that we want to try and cater for people's needs. We know that it's a 2-year course, and that some students struggle with the aspect of maths and English. So how can we better help them with the courses of English and maths is something that we've looked at for next year. And we know that you're happier if you're doing something that you're interested in. So that's why the individual course counselling is important about what subjects suit you. And we know that often students, when they get the opportunity to apply things in their learning, it makes more sense and they feel more comfortable about that. So how can we include that in our programs into the future? So let's have a look at some examples of how you might have different pathways but still under this VCE umbrella. So this first student actually knows they want to be at school, but they also want to go to work as soon as they possibly can, really. I think one of the things to remember is being with your friends, having the opportunity to do other things, not just the schoolwork, can be a big part of people wanting to stay on to be in 11 and 12. You want to do your sport, you want to do your leadership, and you want to reach that end point together. You're committed to doing your work, and for some people, that doesn't see them right the way through to the end of year 12. So student A wants to find work, so they're going to do an English differentiated course, which we will offer next year as part of year 11, bringing in some of that implied learning, completing satisfactory completion of those SACs. They're also going to do an SBAT because they want to see if their apprenticeship their SBAT can lead into an apprenticeship, and for some people that actually happens earlier than the end of year 12. They're going to start with a foundation maths course in year 11, which allows them to build up, and if they stay into year 12, get that maths qualification at the end of year 12, and they're going to use to make up their 5 subjects a VET and maybe a VCE subject because they complement and their interests that they have. That will give them a VCE completion certificate. Similar, but a little bit different, is they're not so determined to be out of school. So again, they're doing a VCE English differentiated course. They're doing the foundation maths with the idea of completing that in year 12. So for an employer, they've got the maths, they've got the English. They're picking up a VET subject and they're going to do a couple of VCE subjects. They could do 2 VET subjects if they wish, so they can complement those others. An example could be they might do sport and rec, but they might do outdoor ed, which is a common thing that students like to complement, and then they might have health and human development as the other one because it all relates to the human body and there's some overlap. Another option, student has absolutely no idea what they would like to do, but they'd like to keep their options open. They might want to go on to do a certificate after school at some institution. They might want to go to university, or they actually might want to go into the workplace, and they might want to do that for a couple of years but have the option of coming back. So they're actually going to start with VCE English, which is scored with the SATs and the exam. Again, they're going to do the same with maths because they would like to have the option of maybe completing general maths with the exam at the end. If there was something that complements that within the VET, or they can actually have VCE, and they're going to pick up 3 of those. They can, as they go, see how they're going about completing those exams and then getting an ATAR. A number of universities take an ATAR as entry, not all universities, which leads to this next slide and course. Increasingly, universities are using this option of early entry. So they know that some students are really hardworking, they're consistent, but they get to those exams and they just don't seem to reach their same potential that they would as they do in their SACs. And so they're wanting students who are applying themselves consistently because they know that they're people who are independent workers and can cope with that transition to university. So they need to have the English. They are going to do the maths, and it depends on this particular student. Maths has various levels of specialist maths, methods, general and foundation. And then they're going to do 3 VCE subjects or 2 VCE subjects and a VET to make up that ATAR pathway. But the early entry means that they're into university for that particular course. Creative arts and other institutions also use a portfolio instead of necessarily this ATAR. So it's actually worth Googling, as Rod said, and actually looking at what is available. One site that I use all the time is the VTAC course search, and you can literally put in anything you want, sport, and it will give you any institution that is actually doing that, and you can find out from that what you actually need. That's the bit of homework for you, is find out all of those things. What are your interests? Put those words in, find out what courses are available. And the final one is the person that actually knows they would like to go to university, they need an ATAR for this particular course, and again, you're doing your Google search and going into that VTAC course search, because this person needs to find out what are the prerequisites, what does the university want you to have in order to get into that course. Usually it is English. If you're going into some courses, they will also state something about maths particular course or a science particular course, or how they will give you extra points for that particular course. And so you really need to know that, so that you, when you're planning your subjects, you've got those in your 6 subjects that you're actually picking when we do interviews next term. So a little bit of homework for you is to actually think about what your interests are and to do some of the research about that, because that can help you to map out your pathway and what goals that you want to work with. And talking about how we help you map that out, I'll hand back to Anne.
Thanks, everyone. We're nearly done. We've made Yaz come tonight as our ICT expert, so I'm going to make sure he earns his money, and I'll switch. There we go. You're with us, Yaz. Good on you. All right, so you've heard a lot of information, and I think one of the things that we keep repeating is that you need to choose something you're good at and interested in. And I'm talking to the people who are enrolled at our school, what you are good at and what you are interested in, not your mates. Don't sit there and go, oh, well, I'll do this if you do that. Don't pitch it on what you think your teacher's going to be, because we might mix it up, okay? Choose something you're good at and interested in. And parents, block your ears. If mum and dad want you to do something and you don't want to do it, come and talk with us and we'll try and get them on board, okay? Because honestly, parents, if your student's going to choose something and do it for 2 years, you don't want to be the parent that has to sit there and nag them and try and get them to do it, okay? So any pathway that you choose is going to lead somewhere and you're going to learn something from it, okay? So an ATAR is just a score. Once you finish, as Mr. Carson said, you're going to forget that score. An ATAR is something that the universities use to determine who's going to get into their courses. Because let's be honest, an ATAR exam where you're sitting there for 2 or 3 hours, you can't get up and go to the toilet when you feel like. You can't wander off to the fridge. You can't go and grab a coffee. I mean, how many jobs are you in where you can't go, I'm just going to Google that, okay? It's not that realistic, all right? So ATAR is about getting to university. So feel free to start thinking about, well, what else can I do? And the universities, as Mrs. Finlay said, are more and more understanding now that there needs to be different ways to enter their university. Early course entry, and also if you finish a qualification such as a Cert 4 or a diploma. Don't be in a rush to enter the workforce, because once you get there, you're probably not going to retire till you're about 60, 65, depending on how much they keep pushing up the pension age. So don't rush to get there, all right? So how are we preparing our young people to make some good choices? We're actually doing quite a bit. So some things in Year 9 that we're doing are listed up there. I won't talk through all of them. Some of them are more obvious. Some of them are less obvious. So things like the Y Lead program that the Year 9s are doing, the social enterprise, they're teaching all of those success skills that I talked about before. And they're getting to try a few different things. They're giving them some confidence. And the thing with, if you do a vet course where you're having to go to TAFE, what you're showing potential employers is that you are brave enough to start entering the adult world. You can learn independently. You can learn under a different system, which is certificates, and you've actually stuck it out and you've finished something. So finishing with an ATAR is you've got your VCE. You might end up doing your VCE plus a Cert 2 in Sport and Rec, and you might be doing an SBAT as well. Imagine getting paid to come to school and only have to come to school 4 days a week. That's a pretty good deal. Year 10, we've been looking at learning styles. We are going to be doing a bit more around study skills and what to do in an exam. They have mock interviews. The work experience is a great experience, and some people are doing it locally and some people are doing it interstate, which is fantastic. And we're trying to be as flexible as we can to accommodate that around some of the Year 10 exams. I know that the VCE Centre sometimes has guest speakers coming in from different institutions and different occupations. There's lots of off-site visits too that Mr Dunbar organises. And I had a look at the newsletter that was released today, and there was quite a bit in there about different careers. So please have a look at the newsletter. Don't just look at the photos too, okay? Actually read a little bit, and if you're going to read anything, sorry, Mr Jones, read the careers stuff, okay? And Mrs Finlay wrote an article in there for this newsletter that got released today with more of this information about the changes and things, okay? Tonight's presentation will be filmed too, so if you want to hear those acronyms again, you'll be able to watch it with a cup of tea or a red wine or something like that. So July 28th, mark it in your diaries, is the Senior School Pathway Evening. So there'll be lots of career speakers, that's the one, isn't it? So it's a bit like speed dating with people from industry. Okay, so come in, have a bit of a chat. And it's really interesting. I really like talking to people about how they ended up in the job that they're in. You know, it might be anything. I'm like, oh, how did you get into that? So start talking to people you know, uncles, aunties, ask them how they got into the job. Okay, often it's kind of who you know, it's making those connections to get somewhere. So I'm pretty sure that's it from us. So we are happy to take a few general questions. I know we're getting pretty close, we are on 8 o'clock, but if you've got a question and it's sort of more to do with your student and their pathway, feel free to hang around for a little bit tonight. When you start seeing the lights flash, that's a really good indication that it's time to go. But yeah, we're happy to take a few questions. Is there any general questions? Yes. So the question was, what subjects will be fast-tracked for next year? So the answer to that is it will depend a little bit on a couple of things. That is the interest from the current Year 9s moving into Year 10, but also a bit on the timetable, the availability in those classes as well. So it's changed, I think, from this year to last year, depending a little bit on their choices. Yeah, thank you.
So 2 years ago, we had specific subjects that we had on the fast track. So it's generally been a biology or a PE. And this year, because we didn't think we'd get enough students in those subjects, what we did was we offered every VCE subject, and we then matched it up with if the student had access to that particular row, that particular line. So it offered up, we had a look at what they wanted to do. So I think we had a few in psych, we had a few in biology, and then interviewed the students, and we then tried to make that available to them. So it is a little bit open slather, but we then have a look at student interest, where it fits in with what we've got in terms of our timetable, and then accessing a Year 10 timetable into the Year 11 and 12 timetable. So I'd love to say it's this, this and this, but it'll come back to the surveys and things that we do.
I think it's important to also stress that not all subjects are suitable for fast tracking, and that's something that we would talk about. So Paul teaches physics, and if I said...
I'd said no, thank you.
You know, it's just, because what you have to remember is that student is performing at a Year 11 or a Year 12 level, so it's really got to be the appropriate to achieve, not for it to fail.
We also, we also had that conversation about if you wait 12 months, will you perform better? And if that's your certain interest, if that's your passion, that you really love biology, waiting 12 months, 12-month more maturity, you're going to get a better result. But sometimes it's that one that's might help, say a PE, where it's going to help with some of the biological systems, and we go, well, let's try that, and then you go into what you really want to do the year after. So there's that conversation that happens a lot of the time.
Thank you. We're almost getting to where VCE is bespoke. We're trying to help everyone, and it doesn't always fit cleanly. So the Year 10's doing a fast track may have to make up a class that they've missed in their own Year 10 timetable. And then we know that the SBATs are often out on a Wednesday, so you are going to miss some of those house sessions if cross-country is run on a Wednesday. And that's where we try to accommodate you, but it's about making choices and sacrifices and deciding what your priorities are for your goals. Any other last general questions? Yes.
Yes, Matt, and those three periods that the students have in their timetable, are they on their own during that time, like self-directed study, or are they with a tutor?
So they would be working in the VCE centre, pretty much, in the middle area. So even today, we had a few Year 10s, and I know at least one of them's here tonight, working on a language through Virtual Schools Victoria. So they do need to have a certain level of independence, but there's always staff in the area sort of keeping an eye on them as well. So that's Year 10s, 11s and 12s, yes. Any other general questions?
Is there any Year 10 student at the moment who started doing that, or do they do school-based apprenticeship from 11?
No, we do have, the one we had up there was a school-based apprenticeship. Do you want, Rod?
Yeah, I should have said that you can start a school-based at any time. Once you turn 15, it could be, you could start one tomorrow if you had the employer and the paperwork and going. So ideally, I think it works best when they do them in years 10 and 11, especially if they're planning to stay to year 12 and then they've got the year 12 free just to focus on their studies. But a lot of the times I'll do them in year 11 and 12. Sometimes students don't start them even till year 12, knowing that they won't finish it, but at least it's an interest and they want to pursue it once they leave school. Hope that answers your question.
Any other general questions? Okay, I think we're all done. So thank you very much for coming this evening. I'm sure, does your head hurt? Whose head hurts? Yeah. Did anyone understand everything that was said up there tonight? Okay, because I was going to say, apart from you, I was going to say if you do, you might want to come in and actually have a chat to some of our staff, because this is really new stuff and we actually haven't spent this long explaining some of the changes to them. So thank you very much for coming. It is a journey, and come and ask information. Don't think, oh, I think it's this or I've heard that. Actually just find out if it's correct. So thank you very much for coming this evening, and thank you, Yaz, for making sure everything works right. Enjoy the rest of your evening and have a lovely weekend. Thank you.